peppered throughout the yogic teachings is this concept of the warrior. And the warrior isn't someone who wants to fight or loves to fight or is trying to pick a fight. The warrior doesn't want to pull the weapon. The warrior is well trained and can fight. However, what the warrior does, this is the true essence of the warrior in the yogic teachings, is asks him or herself, what does the present moment ask of me?
Welcome to the world of energy, where science meets spirit. Ancient wisdom merges with cutting-edge knowledge, and the possibilities for a healthier, happier you are endless.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Energy Works. Lauren is here with me. Hi, Lauren.
Hey, Blaine. Hey, everybody.
We're in a holiday time, and 2 years ago, I did a training called Best Holiday Ever. And what the training was about, going into these family situations where you may have a different diet than your family or different political leanings or other aspects of the way you move through the world that is different than theirs, and sometimes feel constricted about conversations that might happen, or maybe armor up a little bit, or maybe even wish you didn't have to go. And I thought it would be good to bring that up at this time of year in this podcast, because I haven't talked about it in the podcast format. And it's really one of the most popular trainings I've ever done, and probably the most requested that people ask that I talk about. Again, of these, I used to, back when I had my own business, I would do free monthly 45-minute trainings every month. And so this is one that I did. And of course, I had the idea for it based on my own life experience. I'm originally from Oklahoma. It's quite a red state. I'm from Oklahoma City. And I don't know, part of me, I used to always say I was born in the wrong place. Like, God put me in the wrong place. And I just got out of there ASAFP after I went to the University of Oklahoma for college, which is where my parents went and my grandparents went. And that whole thing, although now, of course, I can look at the other side of the coin and think maybe God put me in exactly the right place. And God doesn't make mistakes. And maybe, I do have a view of the world because of growing up in very conservative, very Republican, very red, very Christian, that is the world that I grew up in. However, I personally felt like an alien living there. And I was different from other people. And I think we've talked on the podcast before about me and the apple and, all of that. I've always felt very connected to nature. I felt very connected to animals. And I chose to stop eating meat when I was 12 years old in Oklahoma. This would have been the, early 80s. I didn't know a single vegetarian, not a single person. I don't even think I knew the word vegetarian. I just knew that I had never, ever wanted to eat meat. And by the time I was 12, I felt like I was old enough to make that decision. And so that was when I first kind of started to publicly differentiate myself away from the customs and traditions and all of that of my family. And I have in other ways too. And even in college, papers I did and speeches I gave and that sort of thing were very liberal. The University of Oklahoma is not a haven of liberal thought. I got kind of slaughtered in many of those situations. And then, entered adulthood and moved, but then would come home for holidays and all of that. And so I've always been the weird one or, something like that. And then 15 years ago, I went from vegetarian to vegan. And I think that at these holiday meals, vegetarian was a little more accepted, over time as different styles of eating have become more and more mainstream, where you could just eat the sides, right? Okay, people can maybe understand you didn't want to eat the bird, but you could eat all the sides and you could eat all the desserts. And so for years and years, that was my way. And then suddenly 15 years ago, I couldn't eat the sides because they have butter and eggs and all of these things, that cheese, things that I didn't eat anymore. So I would have to bring my own food. And that was terrifying for me. And so all of this is a long-winded way of saying that I've had it in the political stuff is like, whew, its own other thing. And so I've really kind of grown up wrestling with these ideas. And I'll pause here, Lauren. Do you have your own experiences like this?
Yes, I do, Blaine. And what I think is interesting is probably a lot of people have these ideas of feeling like you're an alien in your own birth family, really. And the food things for me came later and were very almost polar opposite of what you were experiencing in terms of what it was. So there was a time when I went to a full raw omnivore diet. So I was eating like raw meat and raw dairy, raw eggs, like all of that kind of thing. And so I would show up at events and I would just bring my own food with me all the time. And I actually had a boyfriend at the time who was like, that's very Sagittarian of you to like bring your own food with you to places. But people still ask me, my family and extended family ask me to this day, like, do I still eat like this? And I've eaten many different styles of eating through my life. I've gone through a lot of different phases before I landed on what was going to work for me. So I actually was vegan for a time. I was vegetarian for a time. I was raw for a time, not raw meat and dairy, but raw like vegetables and nuts and seeds. And so I still have people that ask me, like, are you still a vegetarian? Is it okay if I make a chicken if you're coming over? And then I have other people are like, are you still eating raw meat? Is it okay if I make a, whatever? So it's like, I find that there's like a little hint of ridicule within that. And also like a little bit of curiosity. And I like to lean more into the curiosity because ridicule is something that I find is just, that could be a whole other conversation. I just really, it bothers me to no end because I've been a victim of it for a lot of my life. And I see it out in the world in others. It's just a horrible thing to do to somebody else, to ridicule them for any choices that they make. But the curiosity piece, I think I'm happy with that because it leads to growth and it leads to at least the first leaning into it is a desire for understanding. And I think that a desire for understanding is something that's really valuable and necessary in the world today. It doesn't mean that I'm going to change my mind, but it means that I'm open and curious to recognizing that there are other ways to live a life. And then if I can see that there are other ways to live a life, then I can respect those other ways and respect the differences that are all around me instead of assuming that everyone's like me or assuming everyone should be like me because I have found something that works for me. And I think that goes out to everything, whether it's what you're eating or what you're, kind of it goes to every facet of life. But so there's like a little drop of what I've kind of felt through with the food experiences that I've had.
I love that. Lauren, is it okay if we cook the meat?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. And just to our listeners, Blaine and I go out for many meals together. So we're all good with accepting each other and being really respectful as well. I always say, because I feel like it's more on the meat eater side, because I don't eat meat at every meal and so I often say to Blaine, like, is it okay if I got the meat when we're eating together, or I'm happy to get the non-meat thing, and because I don't ever want to offend you and I don't have to do it. It's not like if I don't have the burger I'm going to die, so I extend that to you. But we do eat together, and I've learned a ton about food and nutrition and a lot of recipes from you, and so there's definitely a huge value in that cross-pollination, and even choosing to be more plant-based than I am, because I know the politics of meat. And of course, the meat that I eat is very clean and very, regenerative farmed and all of that to the extent that it can be. But I'm still really aware of the climate issues, the political issues around the animal industry. And that's a whole other podcast about how awful that is. So I just want to drop a note in here. If you do eat meat, please try to eat responsibly as much as you can. So anyway, that was a lot more than you asked for, Blaine, but there it is.
Thank you. Yes, any podcast listeners or watchers, you don't need to worry. Lauren and I get along just fine. This isn't even about really being vegan. It's kind of my entryway into this subject. And I'll just take the vegan road a little bit farther for just purpose of an example. And then, obviously politics is, its own thing. And I remember doing this in 2022 and it really being about politics in 2022. And, now here we are where we are in when this podcast is being released in December of 2024. And so, I can imagine that, some people may feel even a little bit more tight than they even did 2 years ago. There was a time in my career when I had my own business that I would help new vegans. People would come to me to have them be for me to be a health coach for them in switching to a more vegan lifestyle or a totally vegan lifestyle, and how to do it healthfully and thoughtfully and, not missing any major or minor nutrients or anything like that. And then the holidays would come and they would always say, "What do I do, Blaine? What do I do at the holidays?" And, my aunt is this and my mom and my grandma and just always a lot of constriction and worry about how to handle these situations their first holiday season as a vegan. And with the people who raised you, it's kind of an experience. And my answer, this is from yoga, my answer was always wait until the moment comes and see what the moment asks of you. And in the Bhagavad Gita, which we've talked about before, and then, peppered throughout the yogic teachings is this concept of the warrior. And the warrior isn't someone who wants to fight or loves to fight or is trying to pick a fight. The warrior doesn't want to pull the weapon. The warrior is well trained and can fight. However, what the warrior does, this is the true essence of the warrior in the yogic teachings, is asks him or herself, what does the present moment ask of me? And so I think that applies to these situations with our families, because we can get so, we're gearing the battle up in our head and we're waiting for Uncle Tom with the question and we're gonna, and we get ourselves just worked up into such a worried, anxious state days before this meal even happens. And so my advice is let all that go into the meal, or the family gathering or party or whatever it is, after doing your energy medicine yoga wake up, which we recently have done 4 episodes outlining, because your energy will be balanced, you will be balanced, and you'll be in the present moment and aware. And so instead of pre-deciding what's going to happen or how you're going to handle it or what you're going to say or rehearsing your lecture or anything like that, just go in relaxed, just like you would any party, and then just see what happens. Because most of the time it's nothing. Because I also talked to these people after the meal and everything was fine. And so I really want to stress doing the energy work on yourself before you go in there, so you're not the one causing the problem, because you're pulling your weapon before anyone is even given a reason to, and can just be present. And then you'll know what to do. Lauren, any thoughts on that or experiences?
I just have to say that this is so fieldy. I know we've talked about the fields before, and we will many times again. And I just taught recently with Hillary McCann Crowley, who we had on here talking about fields. And we came up with this word fieldy when we are all kind of simmering with these same ideas, even though we haven't communicated. And then we talk and we're like, whoa, that's the same exact thing. And so I have to say that is a long way of saying that your response was very fieldy, because just today I've been reading and immersing myself in the works of Dan Millman, and was listening to a podcast with him today. And of course, he is the author of Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And I just finished one of his books that was phenomenal. It actually absolutely blew my mind. I'm getting ready to bring him on this podcast to talk. And in what he was saying today, has so much wisdom. It's amazing. One of the things that he was saying today is just exactly what you said. This is why this is fieldy, because like how does that all happen? But that's another topic. Is that we have all the thoughts in our minds, and right, we know this from yoga, the chitta vrittis. The mind is constantly going. That's what the mind does. And so we're planning and we're thinking, let's just say you said, I know what I'm going to say when he says that, and I've got my answer to my question and all of that. And we're like all here in our minds. I want to be calm, but I'm not calm, and all of that stuff. And really what is most important is what our actions are. What are your actions? And so what you said is so potent. Can you not pre-plan? Can you not have the conversations in your head and the fight all the way through to what, scripting is what we call it in our household, when you're like, you write, and then he says this, and then you don't know what he's going to say, and then you don't know what you're going to say back, even if that is what right, you don't know. So we do this scripting in our head, and then we're faced with the real situation, and the person isn't following the script. And so now you're lost because you've got the script, but your scene partner isn't following the script because they never got the script. So you're not in the present moment, which requires you to be responsive to the situation. And so I think that piece of wisdom is really wonderful to share, of go in balanced. You know who you are. You don't have to fight for your position. You know what your position is. If your goal is to go in and change everybody else's point of view to your position, then that is a very different desired outcome than I'm going to spend time with these people who I love or want to be with. I'm choosing to do this. I'm choosing to go to the situation and to just have a beautiful, grateful, and graceful time together. And no one is maybe asking you to change your position or asking you to fight for your position. You can just show up as who you are. Just show up as who you are. And I love that the warrior never wants to fight. You don't need to go in with your sword ready to slice the cake open, right? Just show up and see if peace is there. And then you can contribute more peace to the peace. And if there's raucousness there, then Blaine, I'm going to bop it back to you. You're going to have some tools for us if there is some other stuff going on there than peace.
I am, yes. What to do if you get triggered. We'll circle back to that. One of the things that I thought of while you were talking, Lauren, is a teaching of Buddhism, which I think really applies to these situations, is whenever you have a problem with someone else, you must ask yourself, what poison am I bringing to the party? And I thought of that because of what you were saying. Am I trying to change other people's opinions? Am I trying to make other people see the world the way I do, or something like that? And so I think when you, and I did a similar thing. It was last Christmas, a woman friend of mine has some, I will just say, issues with a stepfather. And she thought she was going to get to spend some time with her mother. Her mother lives in another state, and she was looking forward to some mother time. And then she found out that the stepfather was going to be there. And she was really upset. And so she called me to talk to me about it. And, it wasn't a situation she was going to be able to change. She knew that. So I had to ask her, like, what poison are you bringing to the party? Because, she has this history with this stepfather, and all of that. And so I think that it's a great question when we feel like we're going to like be in these situations we don't want to be in, to kind of, holding the mirror up to yourself is always a valuable thing to do. And back to the wake up, I do want to also say, this is, we talked about balancing yourself with the energy medicine yoga wake up, but there's a time in the wake up where you set an intention. And when I'm going into these situations and I'm doing the wake up on myself, I like to remind myself that my happiness doesn't come from outside of me. My happiness doesn't come from what other people think of me. And that's why I think that we're kind of in these situations, often we're reaching outside for validation. We're in family. The families know where the triggers are because they put them there, right? So, we're in these more intense situations, and we are looking for validations and approval and acceptance, and the tribe and, all of these things that humans are wired to do. But to know that actually your happiness comes from within you. Your happiness doesn't come from out there. And so I think that's a nice intention when you are doing the zip up and you set an intention for yourself. My happiness comes from within me. And reminding yourself of that that's where your happiness is going to come from, or whatever words resonate with you. But something along those lines to kind of like bring it back in, instead of like it being so, this like the success or failure of this meal is from something outside of you, because it doesn't really work that way. So just kind of bring it to yourself. Lauren, did you want to say anything?
I love that. I love that. It's such a powerful, you are responsible. You're responsible for your happiness. And I do think the piece that gets so triggering is if you are choosing to go back and spend time with the your birth family, the family you're raised from, whether you're born to them or not, but the family that was charged to take care of you when you were young, and did whatever job they did with that, good, bad, or indifferent, like all of and the whole spectrum in between, this is the original imprinting. And there's so much psychology around that. These are the people that we are trying to get from them, what we never got from them when we were growing up, which caused us to become the people that we are today, and seeking the things that we didn't get in other ways, hopefully at this point in your path, in other healthy ways. Some of us are still struggling with unhealthy ways, which we're trying to get the things that we didn't get from the people that were charged to give them to us at the beginning. So if you are going back to spend time with this group of people, you can remember a few things. One is, if you don't see them that often, it's maybe by choice that you made. Like you said, Blaine, you moved away from Oklahoma City as soon as you could. My whole family is in New England. I live in Montana. There's a lot of reasons for that, right? One of them being I love the mountains, but it's a little more than that, right? And so when I do go home and I love my family, and there's no one that can push my buttons faster, easier, deeper, devastatingly than they can. And I don't want to be that button pushed woman any longer. And so there's a few little tricks that I do, and I know you're going to get into that, but I feel like I kind of bring an energy of that right off before I even do any of the little tricks of the trade, of the energy tricks, but just like the psychology that I try to go with in my own mind is, if I were in a room full of strangers, and these were the strangers that I was in the room full, and they happened to be all the people that, whether it's my mother, my father, my whatever, sister, brothers, uncles, aunts, whoever it is, but I want to view them all like I'm just walking into a party that I was invited to, but I don't know anybody yet. And if that's the case, when I go into events, because I often find myself in situations where I don't know anybody. I travel all over, I teach all over, I have dinner with random people at these events, I don't know them. And if one of these random people said something to me that I found rude or insulting or triggering or anything, how would I respond to that? And so I take a pause and I put on my teacher cap, because that's who I am. And I don't do it in a pedantic way, but I do it in a very curious, well, that's a really curious question that you just asked me. Wonder where that comes from. And so I sort of turn the tables in a way that destabilizes the situation slightly and throws somebody off guard, off of their offense. If they are coming to offense me, to offend me, if they are coming to attack me, and this is again the way of the peaceful warrior, is I'm going to dodge that attack slightly and smooth that energy past me and turn the question back to them in such a way that they're all of a sudden like, wait, what? Huh? And then it breaks open the intensity of it. And I don't have to go on the offensive, because that's never my intention, even with somebody that's attacking me. I don't want to go on the offensive. I want to unarm them, but I want to do it in a way that doesn't then bring up a sense of shame in them, or a sense of that they now have to have retribution against me because I've made them feel bad, right? So it's a very delicate dance, and it does require you to be grounded and centered in yourself, so that you're not going to be thrown off your center, but that you can bring a little bit of a lightness to it, a playfulness to it, and a love to it. Because again, these are the holidays, and if you are choosing to go there and be there, can you do that in a loving way? And if you don't think you can, my second question to you would be like, well, do you have to go? Why set yourself up for failure, disillusionment, disappointment, or worse? I mean, maybe you're, on the wagon, and then you're going to go to this event that has the possibility of destabilizing you enough that it's going to throw you off the wagon. Don't make that choice. Don't make that choice. So that was a lot, but anyway, back to you, Blaine.
Yeah, no, that was really good. And it leads me to something else I was going to say. I had planned to say, because I said it in this training. So there's nothing like watching yourself give a training. It's special, learning from yourself and reminding myself what I taught before. When I studied in India with the Non-Mahotra, I have so many notes, and I've just learned so much. I talk about him and all the time, but I think this is one of the most liberating things that he said for me. He said, your parents, and we can say parents, aunts, uncles, whoever, brother, sister, child, they're on their own journey. From a spiritual perspective, they are here alone on a journey. Mom, on her own spiritual journey, has nothing to do with you. Dad, on his own spiritual journey, has nothing to do with you. You have a biological connection, but these spiritual journeys, they don't have anything to do with each other. My spiritual journey has nothing to do with Burke or my brother Kyle. And so let them go. Let them go. Do your spiritual journey, and instead of feeling all this entanglement, let mom go. Let dad go, right? Set them free, right? They don't owe you anything. You don't owe them anything, right? From a spiritual journey perspective. And while that sounds maybe cold or harsh at first, I've had a lot of time to be with this. I think it is incredibly liberating. And I teach this sometimes when I have, friends or in yoga teacher trainings when they're like, well, my mom did this and my mom, and I have a close friend and I talked to her about this and she said to me, well, then who would I blame? And she was dead serious. Well, then who would I blame? And so we get, super caught up in this. And so there's that piece. And then there's the other human, flesh and blood kind of piece of understanding that they were raised in a certain way. Like mom was raised in a certain way, and uncle was raised in a certain way, and grandma was raised. Like, how was grandma raised? And how was grandma's mom raised? And how was grandma's dad raised? And how is that reflecting grandma's behavior? And giving them some grace that you have received whatever education or upbringing, or, you've sought your own studies or your own teachers or whatever that has put you in the place that you are today, with the perspectives you are having today, with the behaviors that you exhibit today. They don't have that. They were raised in a totally different way. And so when I'm with the red state people, to call them that. And, there's a lot, and I start to feel myself get triggered, and I start to feel myself wanting, I'm like, well, how was he raised? And it really gives me perspective on who I'm with, and always makes me stand down internally.
I love that. And I want to add to that, and it might kind of muddy the water a little bit, but I think it is okay. Because while all of those journeys, those spiritual journeys are unique, right? Absolutely. Mother, father, every single person on this planet. We get lessons. And I think that's the place of the birth family, or family of origin is maybe better than birth family, that we get lessons. And Ram Dass said this all the time, and it's one of my favorite of his quotes is, if you want to see how advanced you are in your spiritual journey, go spend a weekend with your family. Because if you think, you're all relaxed and grounded and centered and wise, and then, in 10 minutes at the kitchen table with 4 questions, and all of a sudden you're melted and just discombobulated, you're like, okay, my spiritual journey myself, I have a little more work to do. And so I really appreciate that perspective, because it is difficult. It's difficult to go back to those button pushers and to stay strong. And I think that's the second part of what I want to say, because Blaine shared this a few episodes ago when we were talking about sleep, how she has very strong boundaries. And I think that is something valuable to also bring into these kind of situations. And again, it's sort of that idea of, can you play the game of that this group of people that you've known your whole life? Can you play the game that this group of people is a group of strangers that I've just met? And you would hold a specific boundary that maybe you wouldn't hold if it was somebody that you've known forever, to the point of like, I don't want to talk about that, or that question is really invasive. That's kind of none of your business. Why would you ask me that question? Things like that. You holding your boundary. Oh, just have a little piece. I'm not eating sugar. I know it's Thanksgiving and I know you make the best pies, but I'm not eating sugar right now. Oh, just have a little nibble. I want to get your opinion. My opinion is you're a great chef, and I'm going to say no. Thank you for respecting my boundary. I've been at events where they're like, I know you're a vegetarian, but like, here, eat this. It's got eggs and cheese and butter and all of that, and just a little chicken broth. It's okay, and it's like, no means no. And so to be able to hold that, and to be able to give yourself the grace that you maybe wish that they would all give to you, give yourself that grace as you also try to extend it to others. Give yourself that grace of, whoops, tripped, fell, bummer. Thought I was stronger. Guess I'm not. Let me sweep myself up. Let me go into the bathroom. I'm going to do another wake up. I'm going to do that zip up. What did Blaine say? What's my intention? Let me think. And I'm going to do that. And I'm going to get grounded, a few deep breaths. And I'm going to go back out there and I'm going to try it again. And I'm going to give myself that grace instead of saying, this is horrible. I'm never coming home again. This is the worst. Can you also see the positives? Can you start to focus on the beautiful things that you experience with these people in that moment that you're there with them? Because there likely will be beautiful experiences as well. And it's not to deny the challenges, but it's to put your attention where it feels more comfortable and better. And that really is also a yogic tenet. We talk about that all the time with the mind and focus and meditation, and where you put your attention is where energy flows. It's literally choosing what it is that you want to think. It's literally choosing what it is you want to think. I want to be joyful right in this moment. So I'm going to look around and find the things that are going to affirm that this moment is a joyful moment. And I just can look around my room right now and I can see, oh, there's that little present that Dondi gave me. It's the crossed skis from Finland. Oh, that makes me so happy. Oh, so I can affirm just by looking around the room the joyful things. If I chose to be really sad, I could also look around the room and say, oh, there's a picture of my dad. He died so long ago. I was so young. I can find the things that are going to affirm that sadness is an emotion. So it's like you make that choice. And that, I think, is the wisdom that you can affirm yourself if you're tracking your spiritual path, is like, can I make that choice? Can I make that choice to say, gosh, it's really in my head, it's really sad that that person is still attacking me for that thing or being mean to me, or that makes me sad, because if they're being so mean, they must be really mean and sad inside themselves. That makes me sad. I'm happy, and so I wish that for them. And this conversation is kind of yucky, so I'm going to go to the other side of the room where my favorite cousin is sitting there knitting a beautiful sweater, and I want to go talk to her instead. So like you can make that choice in that moment and navigate that while kind of sharing that grace that you've hopefully cultivated in yourself.
Awesome. That was beautifully said. Thank you. I want to move on to if we do get triggered, because you kind of touched on that. And I have a couple of thoughts, and you're going to see they're really similar to, it's not like we need 50 bazillion tricks. Like in energy, we have a handful of tricks that work great for many situations, because it's intention. Like why am I doing this technique on myself? And you bring the intention of why you're doing it. And then you bring the energetic part of the technique together and you shift the energy in your body. And so breath. If you are seated at the table and maybe there's no, you can't go talk to somebody across the room because everybody's seated at the table, or you're just not in a situation where walking off is totally appropriate right then at first, like counting breaths, just like putting down your knife and fork and just breathing. Nose breath is always calming. And so in and out through the nose, or in through the nose, out through the mouth, if you can't do in and out through the nose right then. But even counting like 10 breaths, 3 breaths, 4 breaths, 7 breaths, whatever you can, just like pick a count that is probably not going to bring attention. I mean, obviously, if someone is staring at you, waiting for you to speak back, maybe this isn't, we'll have another technique there. But, if, just like whatever, you just need to you're standing there or sitting there, just like start breathing. Nothing brings you to the present moment like the breath. The breath is always, you don't breathe in the present. You don't breathe in the past. You don't breathe in the future. You only breathe in the present. So by definition, if you're focused on the breath, you've brought yourself to the present moment, and then you can just count your inhales and exhales. Also good if you really aren't sure you want that second or third piece of pie. Just sit there and count like 10 breaths and just get really present with yourself and then make the decision. Many uses for the breath. And so sitting and just counting breaths and bringing yourself to the breath and getting really present can help you come out of a triggered situation. You can more slyly put 2 fingers right here. You could still even probably do this at the table and nobody would really notice or think much if you just took 2 breaths with 2 fingers down here in your sternal notch. This might be like you're really triggered and need to excuse yourself from the room or whatever, then go to the bathroom or whatever you have and do fingers. I guess for the listeners, I have one hand I'm holding over my forehead, kind of like I'm just covering literally my whole forehead with my palm. And then I have 2 fingers in the sternal notch in the base of the throat, and breath, like all 3 of them. Just breathe, hold your hands on your forehead, hold a hand in the sternal notch of the base of the throat, and get present. And this will bring you, your mind will start to be able to think. And so you'll get out of that heightened, triggered, emotional type lizard brain situation and come back into that executive decision-making brain where you can calm down and think. And maybe you decide you want to leave or whatever it is, but at least it's not an emotional decision to leave. It's a rational decision that you have decided to leave. And so those are all things you can do just there if you happen to get triggered. Lauren, what would you do?
I'm 100% the exact same. That is my go-to, the 2 or 3 fingers in the hollow at the base of the throat. I find that to be incredibly powerful and soothing. It doesn't stop you from feeling your emotions. It just allows you to not kind of spin out with those emotions, but to just be present with them. And then, sort of some of the things that I've shared, that I try to bring myself more into the witness self when I'm in those situations, so that I'm not. And this is, it's interesting to share this out loud with everybody here, but because on some senses it means that I'm not fully. It's not that I'm not fully present, but I'm not only present as myself. I'm present as myself, but I've got this witness with me that's kind of watching the whole scene. And so what it does is my responses are slower. I take time before I answer anything. I'm really kind of taking the situation in. I sort of feel, it allows me to feel more powerful in my own self. That I'm not just, flotsam and jetsam on the waves, but that I actually have my hand on the rudder and one hand on the sail, and that I'm kind of like navigating the room in a way, and almost kind of being like a little bit of the director, but without that kind of intensity, right? So that nobody else knows that I'm doing it. But if you get really skilled at it, you can kind of become the director. You can kind of run the whole show from a very quiet place in yourself. And I think that's a bit of that way of the peaceful warrior as well. It's like you're making things happen, but you're in a very subtle, grounded, centered place. So that it's not really giving you a technique to work on so much, except that if you already know what I mean by being in the witness self, I would suggest that you practice that in these situations where you watch, oh, look at that. Cousin Jeffrey said that thing that he says every time. Oh, look at me. I'm getting super mad like I do every time. This is like the last 20 Thanksgivings. This is exactly how, what would happen if I did something different? Because the thing about energy is it's all interconnected. If I shift my energy, your energy will shift. It's a rule of energy. It's not like you don't have to do anything about it. It's just what's going to happen. And so if I come into the room, I'm like, hey, everybody, I got the greatest piece of news. Hey, everybody, listen. Everyone's going to stop, get quiet, and listen. I just made something happen in that room very intentionally. I came in with a lot of energy and I told everyone to listen to me. So you can do that. It doesn't even have to be that like direct and extent like that. You bring your energy and energy shifts. And so I do that. I do play that little game. I'm sorry for all of my family that may be listening, but I kind of really don't think they are. So I'm going to say it. If you are listening, I'm sorry. I love you all. But I do play that game because otherwise I feel like I'm being manipulated. I can go into that. Like I'm being victimized. This is the same thing. And then I don't ever want to be here again. This feeling is so horrible. Whereas if I go in with that witness self, I can just watch and, okay, I know why that person is doing that. I don't have to take it personally. It's not about me, actually, even though what they're saying is to me. it's actually not about me at all. And the more that you can cultivate that in kind of every area of your life, right? That's the 4 agreements. That's like all of these wisdom teachings that we've had. Somebody's struggle is about their struggle. If they're lashing out at you, it's about their struggle. It's about their issues that they haven't dealt with. Now, that doesn't help you when a fist is coming to your face, like, that person really has anger issues, bop. You know what I mean? Like, okay. But it does give you that understanding that, and if you can kind of, again, anchor into that way of the peaceful warrior. Oh, I can't wait for you all to hear this Dan Millman interview that I haven't even done yet. I'm so excited. But that way of the peaceful warrior is, can you slide to the side and let that punch go by you? And then what is the next intelligent thing that you need to do in that moment? And then you can find yourself in a place of peace, because that's really what we want. We want to be in a place of peace.
Thank you, Lauren. I think that's a beautiful place to stop, with a place of peace. So thank you, watchers, and thank you, listeners. And we are recording this around holiday time, but you might not be listening to it at holiday time, and all of this applies all throughout the year with all kinds of situations you may be facing. So we hope that you found this conversation helpful, and we'd love to see any comments or feedback from you. So go ahead and type them in either the podcast you listen to or YouTube, and we will see you next time. Bye,
everybody.
Alrighty, energy fans, that's a wrap on another positively charged episode of Energy Works. Lauren, this is the part where we get to use our energy puns.
It's been electrifying, hasn't it, Blaine? We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have.
If you're feeling amped up and you want to keep your energy flowing, be sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform.
And we'd love to hear from you, so please take a moment to leave us a review. Your feedback helps us continue to deliver content that resonates, so light up our inbox.
And spark a conversation with your friends to tell them about us. And we'll see you next time on Energy Works.